Yesterday, last week, last year, even the last second is gone. Time took it away, so we have to move on. Tomorrow is not yet here, not promised, as many would say. So the moments we have in front of us are called the present day. However, if we have been so blessed to have done something special with others, if our memories are vivid and joyful, and some of our skills remain, those years are lost, but not gone. And of course, we are not the same. Yet if we are able to come back together for an encore, do what we did yesterday that gave us such a thrill, we certainly can reach back for a moment and make time stand still. There was a group of young musicians who, while still in high school, started a band and experienced a journey of success that lasted for 6 years, more than they ever expected. However, as life has its twists and turns, the group dissolved and everyone went their own separate way in pursuit of their individual goals. After 30 years, one of the group's founders began to think of having a reunion. This process took about 8 years because everyone had to be located. So, after 38 years apart, they finally met for rehearsal. And it was though they had never been apart. This documentary is about the reunion of the Black Haze Band.
Well, before we get started, let's go back into the history of student bands in the East Winston community of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Student bands began as far back as the late 50s, going into the early 60s. And it was as a result of many prominent music teachers like Harry Wheeler, Bernard Ford, Boone, Carr, and of course one protege who received the benefits of those music teachers became a music teacher himself, Mr. Fred Tanner. Let's get a few words from Mr. Tanner about the development of student bands beginning in the eras going back to the late 50s, early 60s.
There weren't that many bands that were organized by students and student run and book and performance and all that completely organized by students. Mr. Wheeler had the Atkins Jazz Band. And before that time, thinking back, there weren't any bands like that. He and Mr. Bernard Ford, organized a group that was known as the Royal Sultans. And they played jazz. They didn't play R&B. And they would rehearse at the recreation centers. And we would sneak in to hear them rehearse. And I think I was sort of smitten by those experiences, seeing those guys improvise. And Mr. Wheeler played trumpet, Mr. Ford played saxophone and piano, played everything really. Melvin Oates played trombone, by the way. They used to call him Schoolboy. And they used to play all the Ellington, Lionel Hampton, Basie tunes.
So now when you finished high school and you went on to college, when you started working in the school system, you were teaching music.
Well, by that time, when I left high school and having experienced the Atkins Jazz Band, that was the first time that I can remember a group of students going out on their own and doing and playing music for dances. Of course, the Atkins Band would play for proms and dances and all kinds of things.
You remember all the talent shows?
Yes,
That's process
that had a lot to do with
that had a lot of inspiring
it. Certainly
force
did.
on it to cause kids to get into music.
It certainly did. And as a result of the jazz band, Clarence Gore, Gore and the Upsetters was an extension of the Atkins High School Jazz Band. And he started to play in the community and play dances and socials and those kinds of things. Of course, I was away at school. So when I came back, trying to carry on the tradition that Mr. Wheeler and Mr. Foy had started with the talent shows. I used to do small talent shows at Kennedy Junior High School. Mr. Carey was present, and he allowed us to do those kinds of things, and that's where Maurice Fonville and Michael Copeland and George Phillips and all those guys were students there. And but before they were late organizing bands, because after Gore had started that trend of students, then you had the Eliminators, you had Joe Robinson.
So kids really started.
You asked a question about the students who were in the Brown Elementary and the Skyland, 14th Street, Kennedy schools. And we're talking about what they were exposed to at home in some cases. You know, some of these kids that you're talking about, Maurice Fonville, came from a pretty good background of support people where he was exposed at home to music other than the general thing that was being played over the radio.
Yeah.
He may have heard a little bit of chamber music. Because most of these students back then, they were not trained to do commercial music, or rap music, or rather R&B music back then. They were trained to do traditional classical music.
Yeah.
And they took the skills that they had and applied it to
Now that we have heard from one of the mentors and teachers of two students of this Black Haze band, let us now hear from the Black Haze band members themselves.
knew he was getting ready. I knew he was getting ready to blast off right there. I
I'm
told
gonna
you.
be everybody a favor.
I said,
Don't
yeah,
be
he
like,
was
don't be
ready
like
to blast.
Marissa's aunt used to say. She used to say, you sound better with your mouth closed. I'm there now.
Okay, man.
And this is all due respect, Kareem. We're just having a moment.
Hey, that's beautiful, man.
We respect what you've done.
71. Come on. 71.
Okay. Okay. Oh, man.
John Howard.
How old were you in 71, Rick?
Give me 1 minute, man. Okay. In 71, I was probably 14, 15 years old. And as I was saying, you know, I met John at the Sea Park Music Store. And we just bumped into each other. He asked me if I knew how to play music and stuff. I told him, yeah, I could play. I didn't know anything, really. I think I had 2 lessons at that point. But I knew how to play Superfly. So I told him I could play. So we hooked up, started the band, eventually got into a battle of the bands at North Forsyth High School, and we won $250. And we bought us a PA system and started playing. And the rest of it is history.
How many original members? Who came up with the name Black Haze?
Well, John and I came up with everything with this group pretty much because we started it. But we used to play stuff like, we used to play rock and stuff. Like Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water, Hendrix. And Purple Haze was out then, so we kind of copped that name off of Purple Haze and put the Black Haze with it.
So when did you come in, Maurice?
I came in the group around, I'd say 74, 75,
How old were you?
about 25.
So you was kind of like the old man in the group then, weren't you?
I'm still the old man.
No, you
True.
I hear that.
I had been on tour, played with several groups by that time. But I was coming back home to Winston-Salem. And I'm a graduate of Atkins High School. And my long-term friend, George Phillips, and I grew up together. We've been knowing each other since I was about 5 years old, 4 or 5. Attended the same schools, same church, same community, road dogs, everything. So after leaving from high school, I went back up north because I was basically born in Philadelphia. That's where my mother lived. And after being there for a while and coming back, he said, I want you to check out this band, Reese. You know, some young fellas, and they got potential. And, you know, I want you to go and just listen to them. And if you like them enough, would you join them? So that's what I did. I had been on tour already with Joe Frazier and the Knockouts. I played with a couple of Marvin Gaye, and Motown acts, Martha Reeves and the Red Devils, different people, but just freelancing in Philadelphia. So he figured with my skills at Berkeley and what I had experienced, come and listen to him and see if you like him. Well, I went there to listen to him and fell in love with John House's playing because he was different. I had seen people who could play guitar like that, but not in this particular area, Winston-Salem. You know, you see him abroad, different places. And he was left-handed, very talented. And I told my friend George, okay, you got something. And from then he went on and he would tell the story how he had a roommate at Johnson C. Smith. And the rest is history. I joined the group. The guys were bad. They really were. They had a gift that they didn't even realize that they had. And when I got with them, we took it to another level, and it groomed even more with all of our culture and experiences. You know, Rick could tell you now, I came in, one of the first people he had ever seen with sheet music and charts. And passing charts out, reading music, and we all fed off of each other and learned different things. I taught them, I learned some things from them. And that's where we started.
So were you at Atkins when the great Harry Wheeler was the band director?
Yes, I did a lot of work under Mr. Harry Wheeler. I was in Philadelphia in my 10th grade year. I came back, and the 11th grade year, I was assistant drum major under Mr. Wheeler. My 12th grade year, I was the drum major of Atkins High School, graduated in 1969. And from there, I went straight to Boston.
So George convinced you to come into the Black Haze.
Absolutely. Had it not
Now, what
been
was
for-
George doing? What were you doing with the Black Haze, George?
Jimi Hendrix, Cry Love, Belly Button Window. One of my favorite musicians simply because he was the barrier breaker, as so many of African Americans have been. Well, I'm looking around this room, I'm looking all around.
So you were
Well,
a
I'm
singer.
looking out my belly button window, and I don't see nothing but frown. And so to answer your question, what happened was Maurice and I and some of the older guys in the group were actually products of what was then a program in the public school systems where music teachers would go around and develop bands and teach you how to play instruments. And some of the names that pop up that are famous in Winston-Salem are like Harry Wheeler, Fred Tanner, Rudolph Boone,
All the teachers.
Right.
Bernard Foy,
Shepherd.
Dr. Shepherd. And so they would go around to elementary schools and teach music. And Mr. Boone was the person that encouraged me to start, and I started out by playing trumpet. And Maurice has just mentioned that he and I were childhood friends. We came up through that program. We attended what was then Kennedy Junior High School. We were in that program, music program. We went on to Atkins, where Maurice was assistant drum major, and I ended up being first trumpet, following in the footsteps of many great Winston-Salem trumpet players.
Yeah.
I went on to college, Johnson C. Smith, where at the time I didn't know it, but I had a roommate named James York, coffee to everybody, and all of that began something that we didn't know would culminate in what it did. So I also had a friend, Rahman, and a gentleman by the name of Billy Carter, who came to me and said, hey, I want you to come and hear these young boys. So I went over to where they were practicing, and at the time they had the gentleman beside me, Terrell Green, on drums, Ricky McErchin, who was always the baby young man in the group, on bass, and of course John Howes, our left-handed Jimi Hendrix superstar, be and was.
Yes.
And I listened to them, and at the time they were all sort of doing what was a prerequisite to be able to get you to be able to play your music, which was to do cover songs and be more like the Temptations, combination self-contained bands. However, the era that I grew up in, the music had begun to become very diverse, and now African Americans were listening to Carlos Santana, Jimi Hendrix. They were listening to, yes, Rattlesnake, War, Led Zeppelin, and Sly and his Family Stone, Graham Central Station. And so what happened was that kind of music attracted me, and the young guys were very amenable to learning and playing it. And I began to go out and look for musicians who could help enhance. And came across my long-term friend Maurice Fonville and talked him into attending a practice. And then I found James Coffey Yours and talked him into attending a practice. And we all became members of the Black Haze Band.
Okay, Darryl, when did you join?
This is tough.
That's terrible.
Terrell, when did you join?
Oh, Rick and I and John, we were the original rhythm section. We all went to school together. So
And you were the drummer. So y'all was pretty young, and bringing in these older guys was more or less a real good thing, wasn't it? Gave you a lot of inspiration.
Yeah, it helped us out a whole lot in our musical vision, because like the stuff that George and stuff, see John and I, we listen to rock and stuff like that, funk music. But see, George was into another different stuff, like with the funky devil. Me and John listened to funky devil type stuff a little bit here and there. But George was the first person to turn me on to Larry Graham. I didn't ever know who Larry Graham was until George brought the quarters to practice, and we started learning water, and I Can't Stand the Rain. I think that was the first song we learned out there. So every time I look at him, I say, "Is you ever fault?" And I play Larry Graham stuff. So, but that was a great awakening for us because it opened us to a whole different areas of music to play.
So when y'all first started doing gigs, well, what were some of the songs that you really learned to play and you really thought you mastered? You played them pretty good. What were some of the songs when you would do gigs?
The stuff, the funkadelic stuff.
Cosmic Slot.
Yeah, Cosmic Slot, Maggot Brain. We've been playing Maggot Brain since I was like 14.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly the Graham type stuff and funkadelic, mandrill, Ohio Players.
Who was your favorite group out of all of them?
Graham.
What about you, Maurice?
That's a good question. I like Bootsy. Okay. I've been a long-term fan of Bootsy, and I would say Larry Graham. I like Sly and the Family Stones. I grew up with a lot of bands. I started playing in combos when I was about 9. It was a Dextel's combo in the 60s. So there were a vast, long line of different kind of music that I listened to. And James Brown and the big bands with horns in them. Even as I mentioned, Joe Frazier and the Knockouts, he had a band with a bunch of baritone saxophones, trumpets, dancers. It's a whole review. So I played along that review line like an Ike and Tina Turner type of band, like an Otis Redding and Wilson Pickett. Strong horn lines and lyrics and a whole lot of funk in there with it. So by the time I got with Black Haze, I could see that they had this rock and roll sound that I enjoyed. To listen to the high screaming of the guitar that John that brought forth to the stage.
Terrell,
Tell,
tell me who were your inspirational forces? I mean, whose music did you really like? As a drummer, right?
My inspiration came from Earth, Wind and Fire. They had two drummers. I was really amazed at the concept that they had. So I drew all my inspiration from, and the percussion that Earth, Wind and Fire.
George, what about you?
Well, the era that I came up with, I was a huge fan of jazz. A lot of jazz was played in my home. Duke Ellington, Lionel Hampton, Sarah Vaughan, some of my favorite musicians, along with Nina Simone. Then, of course, you know, the Temptations. Maurice and I were in a group that just about imitated everything the Temptations did that was positive.
the Imperial Tenors.
And then the times changed where Jimi Hendrix, as I mentioned before, and then Funkadelic came out, which seemed to be a bridge between rhythm and blues, hard rock,
Yeah.
and funk. And again, as Maurice described, and Rick and Terrell, it gave us the freedom. So all of that, and then of course being able to listen to some of the real rock and roll bands, and just kind of assimilating all of that and realizing just how creative a form music was, where you didn't have to limit yourself.
So how long did it take for y'all actually to get to the point where you said, we are really good, so let's roll?
Well, we started off with we're really good.
We thought that all the time.
Well, I mean, when all of y'all came together.
That's how we felt.
It's just that we knew that it was going to take practice and having a group that would be willing to stay together to get a good, consistent feel for each other, and we all became a family. And that was almost a method of operation for most of the African American bands in Winston-Salem, as a shout out to them.
So how long did y'all actually last in the beginning? I mean, how many years did y'all actually stay together before you separated?
From 1971 until I left the group in 1977 to go to college to get my music degree. So, and then there was another faction of the Black Haze thing, Grand Illusion and Nebulous. But for the most part, it was from 71 to 77.
So you had 6 good years of really rolling.
Yes.
And you know, by the time we got out of high school, by the time I got out of high school, we were playing in Montreal, Canada, Florida. You know, we accomplished a lot in that time period.
A lot of college homecomings, all up and down the East Coast. We were opening up shows at Greensboro Coliseums up and down the coast. And many of our idols were backstage while we were on the stage, on the same program, Graham Central Station. We heard us talk about it. They're backstage waiting to play, and we are out there already. So we had moved up to that level. Slade.
So when you,
Taste of Honey, LaBelle. Yeah.
so when did y'all reach the point where everybody more or less started going in their own direction? I mean, what?
Well, for me, I got a call that my mother had passed away in Philadelphia. Now, grant you now, this was my full-time job, being Nebulous at that time. Black Haze changed the name to Nebulous because I had heard there was another group called Black Haze in South Carolina or something. So it clashed, okay? So we did change our name from Black Haze to Nebulous at the time that I was with us. We had hit attractions, we had booking agents, we had road crew, we had everything. I mean, outfits, several outfits. We had a smoke light show, everything was really set. We felt like we even had original material, okay? And I really felt like this.
Now Rick was in college at that time. Rick had split from the band.
Yes. Around that time, yes. We had a guy named Steve, I can't think of his last name, that played bass at that time when Rick had gone to school. But the point was that I made it that I was thinking that this was ready to go and jump off and be something really, really big, which it was. Then I got the call that I had to go and bury my mother in 77. that took me from Winston back to Philadelphia. And once I got to Philly, there was no, go back to Winston type of thing. This is home now, you find yourself a job, or whatever else. And I miss the guys a lot. That brings me back to this reunion that we just had. A lot of the guys I never had a chance to say goodbye to. I'm up there, 77, 78, 79, and I figured, hey, will I see George again? Will I see Rick, Terrell, Darryl, the fellas, Coffee? Because we lived every day together, okay? Practice, travel, everything. And now I'm in a new place, trying to get established again, and stayed up there for a great length of time, over 20 odd years, 25 maybe. So this reunion was very, very touching to me, that Rick was able to get everyone together and do this again, momentous.
When did you come up with the idea to reunite with everybody, Rick? When did you, that reunion idea?
This is an idea I had for years, 10 plus years, but the last time I got with John was when he was here for his mother's funeral, and that was the last time I saw him, and that was probably 95, somewhere about that, and it took me from 95 up until last year to track him back down. And so it's an idea that's been in my head for quite some time, but it took me a long time to put all the puzzle pieces together and find everybody. I didn't know where Terrell and Darryl was at. I used to see Terrell around, and I didn't ever see him anymore. And George, I would bump up into him here and there, and Maurice. But it took me a while to get everybody together, because a lot of people thought I was crazy just to try to do this. And but I had a vision about it, and I'm just thankful that it turned out great. Everybody came in and put in 110% behind trying to make it happen. It's just been an idea that's just finally unfolded. And so I just hope it continues. We're going to try to do this annually, every year. So just going to take it wherever it takes us to.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that Facebook helped us get together with getting people together, because it was
I was absolutely help.
That's social networking.
Social network that got everyone together.
Yeah. But
Through a friend, you can locate another.
and see, actually, that's how I actually tracked John down, was through his sister. And I bumped up into her on Facebook. And then she made the hookup, gave him my number and all that stuff, and it was history from that point. And that's how the ball actually got moving for this reunion gig. First of all, it was just an idea until John's sister contacted him and told him I was looking for him and what I was trying to do. So when he called, then once he agreed, it was on. That's my book. My George called us the bookends.
So actually, all of you guys had been separated for a good
38 years.
30-some years.
Yeah,
38.
we hadn't
38 years?
Yes.
We hadn't performed together previous to the Friday night with the reunion show. We had played together in 38 years.
Man, that's a blessing.
Yeah.
Okay, now, how has everything affected you all emotionally and psychologically? Because you really had the longing in you to even bring it together. The longing must have been in all of you in order for it to come to a visibility. So was it in you? Was it in you, Maurice? Was it in you, Terrell? Was it in you, George? I mean, was the longing in you? You just wasn't saying nothing about it? And Rick just brought it to the head?
I never knew that Rick and the other guys in the group thought about bringing us back together. But I know while I was there, I prayed about it. I really actually put prayer to it. Would I ever get a chance to, God, give me the strength to make it impossible. And we know the scripture says you wait on the Lord. And this is nothing that one person could have done without the Lord being involved in it. Surely Rick was the catalyst in this particular effort, but through prayer and when I got back together and I started seeing everyone's face, it was very emotional for me. I mean, John and I hugged each other and tears came into both of our eyes. I'm not man enough that I can't say that. It was very, very touching. And when we struck up a couple of notes and started hitting each other with the licks and looking at each other, it was just like we were back in time again. It all started coming back. No matter who you played with, or where you've been, it started coming back. And next thing you know, we were back in true form. That's how it worked for me. Now,
Well, what about you, George? I had to kind of encourage you that first practice night.
Well, over the years, you know, the groove is in your heart.
Got to be, George.
But over the years, I had always admired the guys that continued to be active musicians for the fact that I could go see them or hear them at gigs, and it would just kind of, you know, put me in the mindset of what we used to do. And I'm one of those persons that understand that you really just don't regret the paths that you take. So to say that, I still miss being actively involved in music since I got involved myself at age 9. And again, seeing the guys in their different forums, you know, playing. I talked to Maurice a couple of times and asked him what was he doing, and he described his work with his music in the church and some other outside jobs that he was doing. I knew Rick was playing, had really kept track of Terrell. But the idea is that the music is actually in you if you love it. And what we don't realize as people sometimes is that when you have creative forces within you, there are outside forces that are trying to force you into conforming and being what they want you to be. And by having that music alive and well, inside of you, you continue to really be who you want to be. So when Rick started calling, my reluctance, as I expressed to you, was I am a realist. And what I wanted to do was make sure that if we got back together, that the least active member, meaning me, would not be a detriment to the progress and maturity that these gentlemen had pursued over their course of time by being serious musicians. And I'm always a very, very critical person of myself when I'm trying to achieve something. And I give Rick credit. He enlisted the help of some of his friends and my friends to continue to say to me that, you know, hey, we want you to be part of this, and we'll accept you, eroded skills or not. And I said, well, okay. And the fact that it seemed to hinge around that if I continue to be reluctant, that it could fall apart. I'm not saying that my absence would have created that, but I didn't want that to be on my shoulders and on my heart, knowing how hard Rick and some of the other guys were working at putting that together. And so I've reached the end of this sentence.
Terrell, you were pretty young when you first started with them too, weren't
Yeah, I was like 15.
you? 15? And your twin brother was the same age?
Yeah.
See, we all went to school together. Just like when I met John, Terrell, Darrell, and myself and John, we went to Carver School. But I didn't know any of them. I didn't know John until I met him in Seaport. Then I found out he went to school with. And then he introduced me to Terrell and Darrell. And that's kind of how all that connection came up. Because once John said, well, man, you play the bass guitar, he said, I got a drum. And so, and he turned me on to Terrell and Darrell.
and Darrell played trumpet. Terrell played drums, so they had a full band already. You know?
Okay, now where do y'all want to go with this?
Well, I would like to say this, that all of this is Rick's engineering. However, I would like to say much love to the following musicians first. We do have a Black Haze member that we hadn't mentioned. His name is Lynn Woods, saxophonist, keyboardist, who continues to be a a very professional musician today. There's a young lady by the name of Cynthia Bailey who came in and helped us out on vocals and also surprised us with her expertise on bass and just being an all-around good person musician. Stevie Thornton, who currently has a group, I hope I don't mispronounce it, but I think it's Tetava. It's a jazz group.
Freeport Jazz.
Freeport Jazz, and he was very instrumental in helping us recreate our sounds, and he actually was a member of Black Haze back when he was in high school as well. And the drummer for a group called the Old School Players, his name is Mike Cannon, and we kind of nicknamed him the insurance man for the funk. But I just want to make sure that we don't leave anybody out that helped us in making this reunion successful.
Has anybody played?
Bishop from Winston-Salem by way of Dallas, Texas. He and Ricky were instrumental in forming this group called Black Haze. And his name, everybody, is Johnny John Hauser. That little solo was dedicated to Ricky D. And two more original members. They're the Green Twins. We had Tyrell Green on drums, and his twin Darrell Green played trumpet and vocals. And they've rejoined us so we can have a real reunion. These are actually the original members of the Black Haze Band. Tyrell and Darrell Green, everybody. And then things got a little older. I had a friend come to me and say, hey, there's some young guys I'd like for you to come and see if you could do a little thing with. I said, sure I would. And I became one of the members of Black Haze myself. And then I went out on a mission. And I found a young man who had played around the world with Joe Frazier and the Heavyweights. We have gone through school together, known each other since we were about 6 years old. On rhythm guitar from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Maurice Reese Bonfield. On keyboard, I was still on a mission. There was a young man where we had gone to the mighty University of Johnson C. Smith. He was there on a music and academic scholarship. He played with a group called Chocolate Funk. He's played with a group called Funk House. He's backed up Anita Baker. He's traveled everywhere you can think of and back. And his name is James Coffee. Sweet dreams, yours. You knew. On horn back here, you may recognize him as a jazz musician around the city. He's played with Electric Fudge. He actually was a member of Black Haze himself at one time. We call him Stevie Wonder, but his name is Stevie Thornton. As we were putting this thing together, I said, Ricky, you know, I've had a few birthdays. we might need a little help. And he says, don't worry about it, George, I got you. And so he went out, he said, I know a heavy-footed drummer. He said he's going to help us sit down and put this thing together. He also plays with the old school players band known as OSP. After I met him and listened to him for a few minutes, I had to give him a nickname. And we call him the insurance man for the funk. Ladies and gentlemen, Brother Michael Cannon. Boy, I tell you what, he doubled up on that good pedal. So Ricky, I said, Ricky, we're still gonna need a little bit more help here. He said, what do you need, George? I said, we're gonna need somebody to help us sing. He said, I know just the perfect person. We have really enjoyed working with this young lady. She has really kind of brought the funk back to what we were all trying to do. You may already know her. She's well known around town, and her name is Cynthia Sid Bailey. So we just wanted to give you a lead in just to say that our whole goal is to have fun and go back to the 70s and do a few things that we all used to love to do. So if you don't mind helping us up tonight, we welcome you here to Tony's, and let's get ready to rock them out a little bit. Hey, Roddy.